A 3-star general was handcuffed like a thief on a highway in her own country. And the worst part? The officer didn't believe her because she didn't look like what he thought power should look like. But this time, the silence was recorded, and the system had no choice but to listen. So what do you think happened next? Let's find out. "You been sitting here long?" The voice broke the silence, crisp and male with the kind of familiarity reserved for authority. The road was still. Desert stretched to either side of the highway like a sheet someone forgot to fold. Katherine Doyle had pulled over to recalibrate her military-issued GPS. The map had stuttered at a fork unmarked by Google or memory, just another forgotten patch of West Texas heat. She kept both hands on the steering wheel, fingers steady, knuckles soft. Through the side mirror, she caught the blue and white Ford Cruiser's flashing lights slice the orange dusk in jagged pulses. A single figure stepped out, posture tight, steps loud. She rolled down her window halfway. The wind smelled of hot sand and engine oil. "I asked you a question," he repeated. His badge read, Wallace. His face sunburned and stiff with a forced smirk. 5 minutes, she answered, tone even. GPS lost signal near the old rail yard curve, reacquiring. Wallace narrowed his eyes, leaned down slightly. "License and registration." She nodded, slow and measured. "In the glove box." "I didn't ask where it was," he muttered. "I asked for it." Katherine moved deliberately. No sharp motions, no sudden gestures. She'd taught this protocol herself at West Point, the art of calm under scrutiny, the performance of harmlessness. The glove box clicked open. Documents emerged crisp and clean. Wallace took them without thanks, glancing briefly before his gaze lifted to her face again. "You military?" "Yes." "What rank?" She met his stare. "Lieutenant General." He chuckled. "Right. Got any proof of that in my wallet, alongside a DoD credential." His eyes roamed her dash, settling on the GPS unit still blinking softly. "That military." "Yes." He straightened. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." Her hands remained on the wheel. Is there a reason Wallace's smile thinned? "Suspicious activity. You're parked outside a restricted maintenance road. Could be casing for something. I'm en route to Brookfield Base. I've passed this way for 15 years. That right?" He tapped the papers against his leg. "Still need you to step out. For your safety." She looked forward a beat longer than necessary, then undid her seatbelt with a sigh sharp as metal against metal. Outside, the sun had dipped behind the low ridge, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. The hood of the Jeep was still warm, its residual heat seeping through Katherine's thighs as she stepped forward and pressed her palms against the metal. Her fingers splayed wide muscle memory from countless drills, except those had structure oversight, a chain of command. Here, there was only Wallace, and the heavy, encroaching dusk. "Spread your legs," he said, voice low and deliberate, each word landing like a stone in still water. Katherine complied, boots grinding softly into the gravel shoulder. Her pulse quickened not from fear, but from the cold clarity of what was unfolding. She braced herself, spine-rigid eyes locked on a distant ridge where a hawthorn tree stood twisted against the bruised sky. Wallace's hands began at her shoulders, the touch, initially firm, almost procedural. But as they slid down her arms, the pretense unraveled. His fingers lingered at her elbows, thumbs grazing the soft inner skin with a slowness that felt like a claim. Then a subtle shift. His palms brushed the sides of her breasts, deliberate enough to erase any doubt, light enough to mock plausible deniability. Her stomach churned a visceral knot of disgust and memory. Other hands, other rooms, other violations flickered in her mind. Ghosts she'd buried under years of discipline. "Relax," he muttered, his breath too close, stirring the hair at her neck. The word was a blade slicing through her restraint. Relax. As if her body was his to command her will, a thing to be surrendered. Her jaw tightened, teeth grinding until a faint ache bloomed in her temples. His hands descended further, bolder now. Fingers traced the curve of her waist, then dipped to the small of her back where they pressed with possessive weight. A pause calculated predatory. Then his fingertips slid along the tops of her inner thighs, slow and invasive, far beyond any protocol. They lingered there, brushing the seam of her pants, a violation disguised as procedure. Her breath caught a sharp, involuntary hitch she immediately regretted. She forced it steady, denying him the reaction he sought. Her mind, trained for survival, began to catalog the angle of his fingers, the pressure against her thigh, the exact duration of each touch. She'd done this in interrogation drills, in simulated captures, compartmentalize, observe, endure. But this wasn't a simulation. This was flesh and intent, a man wielding power because he could. Her skin crawled, a primal urge to lash out, warring with the colder instinct to survive this moment intact. "Nothing dangerous here," Wallace said, his voice slick with mock amusement, as if the act was a game, and she, the unwitting player. "Nothing you'd find?" she replied, her voice low, steady, a quiet defiance that cost her more than he'd ever know. He stepped back, but the reprieve was fleeting. Wallace circled to the passenger side of the Jeep, his flashlight beam dancing along the windows, a lazy performance of authority. Women in uniform, he called over his shoulder, always think they're untouchable, always wrong. She turned her head slightly, just enough to track him in her peripheral vision. "You done with my Jeep?" He smirked, sauntering back toward her. "Might be something in the back seat, or under it. You'd be shocked what people hide. I gave you the registration. You ran my credentials. Credentials can be faked. Pretty women with badges even easier." His eyes raked over her, a slow appraisal that felt like another touch. "You don't look like a general, more like someone's idea of one." Her pulse throbbed in her neck, a visible rhythm she couldn't suppress. The old scar on her shoulder ached, a reminder of battles fought and survived. She met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm done talking." Wallace closed the distance, his presence suffocating. The back of his hand grazed her side, then her hip, a deliberate brush that lingered too long. His fingers curled slightly, testing her silence, daring her to react. "That's so." His voice was a challenge thick with entitlement. She said nothing. To speak now would give his actions weight, make them hers to carry. Silence kept the shame his alone. He moved behind her, his boots crunching gravel with predatory patience. "Hands behind your back," he ordered, his tone darker, stripped of pretense. "On what grounds?" "Resisting a lawful search. Suspicious vehicle. Failure to comply." The words were rote, a script he'd rehearsed. "You had no probable cause." His grin was audible, a low chuckle that made her skin prickle. "That's for someone else to decide." The cold bite of handcuffs snapped over her wrists, the metal biting into her skin as he ratcheted them tighter than necessary. He yanked her arms back her shoulder, straining the scar tissue beneath her muscle, screaming in protest. With a rough hand, he pushed her forward until her torso pressed against the Jeep's hood. The warm metal, a cruel contrast to the chill spreading through her chest. "Comfortable," he taunted, his voice closer now, his body looming behind her. Her jaw locked, sweat beading under her collar. She refused to answer, refused to give him anything beyond the steady rise and fall of her breath. Her mind clung to details, the angle of the hood, the faint smell of engine oil, the silhouette of that crooked hawthorn tree. Anchors to keep her from fracturing. Wallace leaned in, his breath hot against her temple, a violation more intimate than his hands. "Don't worry," he whispered, the words dripping with false reassurance. "Someone'll vouch for you, if you're really who you say you are." His hand slid up her side again, fingers splaying over her rib cage, pausing just below her chest. The touch was slow, deliberate, a final assertion of control. Her body tensed, every muscle coiled, but she forced herself still. To fight now would escalate this into something she might not survive. Not here, not alone. The crunch of gravel under tires came first, soft, uncertain, then headlights. A silver sedan rolled to a slow stop on the opposite shoulder. Not the kind of car you expect to intervene in anything a commuter's Camry, maybe 10 years old, brake pads squealing faintly as it settled. The door creaked open. A man stepped out, tall and angular, adjusting the angle of his phone with both hands, like he was setting a lens on something delicate. Captain Matthew Langley had pulled off instinct more than plan. He'd spotted the patrol car first, then the woman pinned against her vehicle. What gave him pause wasn't just the cuffs. It was her stillness. Trained. Measured. Not typical. He tapped his phone's screen. Red dot. Recording. Through the camera, he zoomed. The cuffs were real. So was the tension in the officer's stance, hand low too close to his holster. The woman didn't flinch, but her posture was wrong for a civilian. Too squared. Too rooted. That, and the insignia barely visible on the lapel of her cargo shirt. He whispered to himself, "That's not just anybody." Katherine didn't see him yet, but she felt the shift, the faint change in air pressure that comes when someone new steps into a dangerous equation. Wallace's hands paused. Then she raised her voice, calm but firm. Her tone bore weight like a flag does in still air, silent but unmistakably present. "My name is Katherine Doyle, Lieutenant General, United States Army. ID number 600417 Charlie. I am on active orders under the jurisdiction of Brookfield Command Base. I demand immediate verification through Central Ops." Wallace froze, blinked twice, then let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "General, huh?" he mocked. "Is that what we're doing now?" "You've exceeded your authority," she said. "And you know it." Langley zoomed tighter, catching every word. The audio wasn't perfect, but the tone, the conviction was crystal. Wallace shifted his weight. "You expect me to believe some woman out here in the dark claiming rank?" Katherine's voice did not rise. That was the trick, never let the temperature match theirs. "I expect you to follow protocol, and I expect your body cam to reflect what happens next." His jaw twitched. For a second, just one, his fingers eased on her wrist. Not much, but enough for her to sense it, doubt, awareness, maybe even fear. Then denial. "No body cam tonight," he muttered. "System glitch." Langley stepped out from behind his door. Not too fast, not aggressive. Just enough to show he was there, a witness with eyes and footage. Across the road, his voice carried. "You're detaining a general officer." Wallace turned sharply. "Who the hell are you, Captain Matthew Langley?" "U.S. Army." He held his ID up, arm steady. "You might want to stop whatever you think you're doing." Katherine exhaled, slow and quiet. That was the pivot. She knew it in her bones the moment the power began to drain from one hand and pool into another. Wallace hesitated. His gaze flicked from Katherine to Langley, then back. The red recording light on the phone across the street glowed like a silent alarm. "But denial is a stubborn god." "You're both full of it," Wallace spat. "Nobody's above the law." Langley didn't lower his phone. "And no one's below protection." More lights appeared on the horizon. Another car. Then another. Highway curiosity bloomed into slow attention. A woman in a pickup pulled over, phone in hand. A couple in a sedan slowed, windows rolled down. The scene had shifted. The road which had belonged to Wallace minutes ago was no longer his. The first thrum came like a warning from the earth itself, deep and distant, too rhythmic to be wind. Katherine felt it in her chest before she heard it with her ears. That unmistakable pulsing beat of rotors slicing through air with military precision. She turned her head slightly toward the sky, wrists still locked in metal, jaw clenched. Wallace didn't notice it at first. He was still posturing, tossing glances at the growing crowd, eyes darting like a man outnumbered at his own card table. But the sound grew louder. It wasn't the random chop of local news or traffic patrol. This was clean, heavy, trained. A shadow swept across the pavement. Then another, heads tilted upward. The helicopter came into view above the ridge, dipping low but steady, like a judge descending from chambers. No insignia on the side, just that matte gray hull like war paint against the pink-orange dusk. Wallace stepped back from Katherine. "What the hell is that?" he muttered. Katherine said nothing. She didn't need to. The sky was speaking now. The chopper didn't land on the highway, it hovered just beyond over the adjacent service field, its downdraft bending weeds and flaring dust across the blacktop. No one mistook it for coincidence. Then came the SUV. It appeared without sound at first, black, sleek headlights off tires, whispering over gravel. It didn't jolt like a local cruiser. It glided. The kind of vehicle you only saw in federal convoys or film. It stopped 2 cars behind the patrol unit. The driver stepped out first, civilian clothes earpiece gleaming. He opened the rear door without looking up. Colonel Samantha Harris exited as if the gravel had been placed for her feet alone. Tall, composed, wrapped in a dark navy service coat, with her silver insignia flashing like a silent warning. Her hair, steel gray and coiled into a neat knot, did not move in the breeze. Her eyes scanned the scene once, and only once. Wallace stiffened, still halfway between defiance and confusion. "Colonel Harris." He began stepping forward. She raised a hand. Not a wave. A command. "Step aside, officer." This woman." Wallace gestured at Katherine, who hadn't moved since the cuffs clicked shut. She refused compliance. Claimed rank. "She doesn't claim rank," Harris said. Her voice was quiet. That was the danger in it. "She has rank." Wallace looked around at Langley, still filming at the onlookers, now murmuring their phones, capturing every second. Colonel Harris walked directly to Katherine. Not hurried, not hesitant. "General Doyle," she said evenly. "Are you injured?" "No, ma'am." Harris produced a key from her inner coat pocket, stepped behind her, and undid the cuffs with 3 practiced movements. They clinked softly against her palm before she slid them into her own pocket without ceremony. Katherine turned, met Harris's gaze. "Thank you," she said. The colonel's nod was slight. "You shouldn't have had to wait." Then she turned to Wallace. "Badge." He blinked. "What I said, hand me your badge. I was just doing my job." She wasn't cooperative. Officer Harris stepped forward, not raising her voice. "You just placed a 3-star general under arrest on federal soil, without verification of identification, without probable cause, and in full view of multiple recording devices. That's not doing your job. That's institutional malpractice." Wallace's breath quickened. She wasn't in uniform. She was in service. Harris's voice didn't shake. "Which is more than I can say for you." He swallowed hard. Hands slow, he reached for his badge, unclipped it, and held it out. Harris took it with a calmness that felt like judgment. Katherine adjusted her sleeves. The red lines on her wrists had already begun to fade, but they burned like new scars. She didn't hide them, didn't smooth them away. Wallace turned to look at her one last time, as if searching for some ounce of redemption in her face. All he saw was steel. "I told you," she said, softly. "You'd remember this." Behind them, the helicopter banked slowly westward, its rotors quieter, now job done. Langley lowered his phone. Samantha turned toward the crowd. "This is now a restricted federal scene. Please return to your vehicles." No one moved right away. Respect takes a moment to settle. By dawn, the clip had over 3 million views. It started with Langley's camera steady clear, no commentary. Just images, a woman pressed to the hood of a Jeep, her wrists cuffed, her eyes forward. Then her voice measured, precise, declaring her name, rank, and orders. And finally, the arrival of the helicopter, the SUV, and the woman with silver hair who undid the cuffs without asking questions. The internet didn't just notice, it ignited. Veterans reposted the video with disbelief and rage. Civil rights attorneys broke it down frame by frame. Retired generals spoke out on national broadcasts. The phrase Lieutenant General Katherine Doyle became a trending topic on every platform, from TikTok to PBS. But Katherine had no interest in screens that morning. She sat in her brother's living room, wrapped in the hush of old hardwood floors and ticking clocks. Her palms rested on a chipped mug of black coffee gone lukewarm long ago. The house smelled like cedar, and the blinds cut long bars of dusty light across the floor. Eduardo leaned in the doorway, sleeves rolled, phone in hand. "They're calling it a landmark incident," he said. CNN, NPR, even Stars and Stripes. One anchor said it's the moment America watched power remember itself. He looked up. "You should see it." "I lived it," she said. He hesitated. "They're asking for a statement." Katherine traced the rim of the mug with her thumb. The ceramic was smooth in places, rough in others, like skin after a scar heals but doesn't forget. "I gave them what they needed," she said. "I don't owe them more." "They're not asking for justice," Eduardo said quietly. "They're asking for leadership." She didn't answer, just turned her gaze toward the window where a neighbor's flag rustled on its pole, faded star's frayed edge, still hanging, still trying. Outside, a mail truck trundled by. Inside, the air held a different kind of tension, the kind that comes not from danger but from the question of what comes next. By noon, the official response came. The Brookfield Police Department issued a temporary suspension for Sergeant Brent Wallace pending internal investigation of procedural misconduct. The statement was short, vague, and buried under pressure. But it wasn't enough. Not for the Veterans Legal Alliance, not for the Women in Uniform Network, not for the public. Commentators called it a failure of training. Advocates called it a systemic rot. A retired senator from Maine called it a moment this country better not sweep under the rug. And all the while, Katherine said nothing. But that silence only made the sound louder. By evening, old friends called, soldiers she'd mentored, commanders she'd clashed with. A former cadet from West Point wrote a letter that ended up in the Atlantic titled, "She didn't raise her voice, so we raised ours." And in Washington, phones rang that hadn't rung in months. Congresswoman Elise Morton held a press briefing on the Capitol steps flanked by veterans and policy advisors. "This incident is not just an abuse of power. It's a blind spot in our civil-military framework," she said. "If a three-star general in active service can be assaulted and detained without cause, then the system isn't just flawed, it's fractured." The invitation came folded in linen stock paper embossed with the seal of the United States Department of Defense. It had no preamble, no flourish, just the when, where, and who. The date was set. Katherine Doyle had given orders in briefing rooms sealed from the world-issued commands under sandstorms and gunfire, but none of those moments carried the weight of the one that now hovered in the thick stillness of the hotel room in Washington. The suite overlooked the Potomac, choppy and brown this time of year. A breeze pushed against the window, tapping faintly like it was asking if she still had time to turn back. She didn't. On the side table, her dress uniform lay pressed and waiting. No medals were pinned yet, just the fabric, deep navy and stiff with ceremony. She ran a hand over the chest, smooth but with gravity, like it remembered. Eduardo sat on the couch, legs crossed, watching C-SPAN without sound. His suit looked borrowed. The tie was new. "You look like you're heading to a funeral," he said. "I might be," she replied. He turned off the screen. "You sure you want to say it?" She nodded, slow. "If I don't say it, someone else will, and they'll get it wrong." Downstairs, the lobby buzzed with security and staff. Cameras, bright lights, questions not yet asked. She didn't bring a speech, didn't need one. What she carried was already written on her wrist, still faintly read, in her silence still measured, and in the gaze she'd practiced for decades, one that told the truth whether people were ready or not. At 1:58 p.m., she entered the conference room behind the Pentagon's press podium. No music, no military band, no flags beyond the two on either side of the seal. The reporters stopped murmuring, the flashbulbs dimmed, every lens turned forward. She walked up with a cadence that didn't ask for attention, it drew it. Her hand touched the mic, she didn't adjust it. "My name is Katherine Doyle," she began. "I am a soldier, a daughter, and a citizen. I've served under 5 presidents deployed to 3 continents and worn this uniform for 26 years. It has never asked me who I was outside of it, only how well I served within it." She let that sit. "Last week I was detained on American soil, not because I broke a law, not because I posed a threat, but because my authority was invisible to a man holding a badge and his power needed a place to land." Someone in the back coughed. No one else moved. "I did not come here to shame a man," she continued. "I came here to speak to a system, A system that teaches restraint, valor, and chain of command, but forgets to teach recognition, dignity, safety. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the military ID Wallace had once dismissed without looking. This card was enough to fly into combat zones. It wasn't enough to stand still on a Texas road. Her voice didn't rise, but the silence behind it did. A soldier should not need stars on her collar to be believed. A woman should not need scars to prove harm. We serve to protect a nation that must remember to protect us back. There was no applause. That hadn't been invited. But the air felt different, thicker, like something important had been named aloud. She stepped away, didn't linger. Outside the building, Eduardo waited with a folded coat over one arm. "You kept it plain," he said. "They'll fill in the rest." And they did. By midnight, the press dubbed it the Doyle Declaration. Within 48 hours, Congress introduced the Doyle Protocol Reform Bill, a structured set of measures to train law enforcement on military identification, to establish rapid verification centers during civilian police interactions, and to require sensitivity briefings for all federal-state cooperative operations. The push had bipartisan teeth. More than that, it had faces. Soldiers, young old men and women posted videos of their support. Some in uniform, some long retired. They spoke of her composure, of the quiet resolve they'd learned from her, of the things they never said aloud until now. This wasn't about rank, one said. It was about value. The letter was short, 2 pages, single-spaced, no ceremony. It arrived folded in a plain envelope slid beneath the apartment door of Brent Wallace in the early hours of a quiet Tuesday. The department's seal glared up at him like a silent reprimand. "Effective immediately, your employment with the Brookfield Police Department is terminated. Your conduct during the traffic stop of Lieutenant General Katherine Doyle constituted a breach of protocol, abuse of authority, and failure to adhere to federal verification standards." It didn't say disgrace. It didn't have to. He sat on the edge of the couch, the letter limp in his hands, its words blurring at the edges. The television murmured in the background, some late-night commentator reciting the same footage he'd seen now for 10 days straight. He muted it. Couldn't bear his own voice echoing back anymore. Across town, Katherine stood in front of a full-length mirror at the National Defense Institute. Her uniform, as always, was crisp. Today, she didn't wear her medals. Just the 3 stars on her collar and the silence they earned. The first class under the Doyle Protocol was about to begin. A group of 23 federal law enforcement instructors sat in neat rows, clean-shaven, well-pressed, uncertain. Their eyes held a polite discomfort, the kind that comes when being watched while trying to unlearn something you didn't realize you knew too well. Katherine didn't speak first. A civilian facilitator opened the session with a slide showing her name the night of her detainment and one phrase in bold letters: "Respect should not be retroactive." Then she stepped forward. No notes, no podium, just her voice and the room. "You've read the headlines," she said. "You've seen the footage. But what matters isn't what happened that night. It's what we're willing to do with it now." She scanned the faces. Older men with crossed arms. Younger women leaning forward, a few already taking notes, pens moving like they were tracing their own redemption. "This isn't about guilt," she said. "It's about responsibility." No one interrupted. No one looked away. Afterward, as the participants broke into discussion groups, a tall man approached her in the hallway. His badge read Lieutenant Frank Niles, New Mexico Highway Patrol. "I served," he said simply. "Did 2 tours in Helmand." She nodded once but said nothing. "I want you to know," he continued, "what you said today, it wasn't easy to hear, but it was right." Katherine studied his face. "It's not supposed to be easy." He looked down. "I've cuffed people too fast before. Never someone in uniform, but that shouldn't be the measure." "No," she agreed, "it shouldn't." Across the country, the Doyle Protocol was being unboxed in precincts and academy halls, videos, simulations, dialogue workshops. One module bore a chilling reenactment of Katherine's stop acted in shadow and score ending, not with cuffs, but with an officer stepping back and making a call. It was jarring and necessary. Cadets at West Point were assigned her transcript in ethics seminars. Not for its outrage, but for its restraint, its clarity, the stillness of a voice that didn't rise even when everything else did. And yet Katherine found no comfort in the reform. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't rage. But there was something that stayed in her, an echo she hadn't shaken. That cold press of steel on warm skin, that hovering breath at her temple, the quiet assumption that no one would question what was being done to her because of who she wasn't at that moment. She walked often now, late through neighborhoods that blurred streetlights with tree shadows. Her boots still clicked against pavement, but now the sound felt heavier. Each step a memory, each silence a reminder. One night, Eduardo found her on the balcony, arms folded over the railing, staring into the haze above the Capitol dome. "You changed something," he said. She didn't look at him. "I changed one thing." He leaned beside her, eyes tracing the same skyline. "Sometimes one thing is enough." She shook her head slowly. "Not for the ones who never got the camera, the ones who weren't wearing stars." A long pause passed between them. Then he asked, "Would you do it again?" She looked down at her hands. Strong, weathered, marked. "Yes," she said. Because dignity doesn't carry itself, and neither would she stop. Katherine Doyle's journey is a striking portrait of quiet strength meeting systemic failure. Her unwavering composure in the face of humiliation is not only admirable, it's transformative. What makes her character so compelling is that she never raises her voice. Instead, she raises the standard. The story's power lies in how it turns a moment of personal violation into a national reckoning, not through vengeance, but through accountability. The dignity she maintains even while handcuffed becomes a mirror for society to examine its own blind spots. The most profound lesson here is that respect should never be conditional nor retroactive. Authority doesn't reside in appearance, but in integrity. Katherine's path reminds us that change often begins not with noise, but with restraint, clarity, and the courage to speak only when silence has done its work. Her resilience doesn't just challenge power, it redefines it. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and share it. Leave a comment to tell us how it inspired you, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. May God bless you and be with you every step of the way.